Hello survivors and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is episode 36, and in this edition we travel back in time to the early 2000s to dust off the legends of the Resident Evil 4s that never were, in beta builds 3.5. My name, in the eyes of the law, is now officially Sai, and joining me on the panel this week, in an alternate universe, he's not at the whims of Talk Talk, he owns Talk Talk. It's Fire Button Steve Valance.
Hello.
In an alternate universe, he spent his money on investment banking rather than a rather impressive amiibo collection. From Serial Box 64, it's Jordan Sugru.
Hello, folks.
In an alternate universe, he's dropping hard facts about Predator on your Twitter timeline. It's Moist Owlet, aka James.
Hello.
And in an alternate universe, he got to say a big old F-bomb in an extended cut of the podcast launched exclusively on HBO Max. It's Boy Wonder Adam.
Hello.
This episode of First Aid Spray, like all others, was recorded live on our Discord server. Enter our little world of survival horror now to hear the show early and unedited, as well as join our wonderful community and keep up to date with all of the latest news. You can find a link to the server, as well as all of our other social media profiles at our website, faspraypod.com. You can also help the show by checking out our merch or by supporting us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month, with various tiers, each with their own perks. Head over to patreon.com/FASprayPod for a full list and the chance to create bonus First Aid Spray content. First of all, thank you to our latest Patreon supporters. Thank you to Christopher Taylor and thank you to Chris Ortiz. Your patronage very much appreciated. And again, thank you to everyone who has backed us on Patreon. It helps keep the lights on, as it were. We're driving that number up slowly but surely. Going to unlock another bonus episode at this rate. Quite like our Heavy Rain episode, which is out now for Patreon backers. 2-hour discussion on the 2010 David Cage PS3 juggernaut that was. A very enjoyable time, as was mine and Steve's discussion of the Resident Evil 2 soundtrack in the second episode of Now That's What I Call Survival Horror. Both of those have come out, as they always do with our bonus content, a month early for Patreon supporters compared to the public, which means they got to hear our Silent Hill 2 episode a month early, but that is now out on your feed for everyone to enjoy, so make sure you update your podcast feed and check our YouTube to hear us talk about that horror classic. Our Patreon supporters also get to see all of our YouTube videos early, which this month included 5 things we want to see from Village, which was not just edited but also written by Mr. KDB, so thank you to him for shouldering that one. And on April 1st we had to drop something goofy, so I put all my energy into top 5 hats in Resident Evil. So definitely both sides of the coin in terms of those videos, and there's some really cool stuff coming up. We're going to follow that Village video with one about RE-verse too, so keep your eyes open for that. I will be talking about that shortly, but it's going to be one heck of a chonky boy this episode. This is our first time recording since the 25th anniversary of the series, so there is a lot of Biohazard news to get through, so please take it away, Steve.
So the Resident Evil Showcase is set for the 15th of April, and it promises another Village trailer with hopefully some gameplay and more.
Typically, of course, they're going to do this almost immediately after we're done recording, but we will be streaming our reactions like we did with the first one, so stop on by twitch.tv/FASprayPod. 15th of April, it's 11 p.m. BST. Looking forward to it. I think we're probably all in the same boat in the sense that I hope they don't show too much more. I'm relatively hyped at this point. I don't need to see much more than we already have, so it'll be interesting to see the sort of balance between Village related stuff and the other things that we know are in production as well. James, any expectations or hopes for the showcase?
I'm the same as you. I think most of it's here. I think the thing I'd like to see is kind of game modes, like more of a description on game modes and stuff like that. Just like quality of life stuff as well. Excuse me. That would be cool just to see game modes. Sorry, chat. But yeah, just some more stuff that we can play with, because that game, just from seeing that small snippet they released today, looks so good. Like I am so excited about this game. I really don't want to be spoiled too much.
Yeah, Adam, as far as I know, you're one for sort of avoiding trailers on the lead up to things. Are you going to be doing a pass on Showcase and just sort of waiting it out? Because we're only 3.5 weeks away.
Exactly. Is it necessary at this point? I feel like this is for like when they do this stuff this close, it's just to keep the game in the public eye.
Right.
Like, for those of us, you know, who are obviously salivating over its release, I don't know if it's super necessary. I don't know yet. I mean, I'll probably join in and watch it with you guys because it's fun to do.
Right.
I'm just hoping it's not too spoilerific.
Yeah, that is the concern, because even just we can think about recently with RE3 Remake, the last trailer before the game came out was just way too much. They showed way too much. Let's hope it's not a case of a similar thing. I think that Village is probably the most hyped up RE game we've had in a, I don't know, maybe more hype than
Forever.
Remake 2. Possibly that's the only thing that I contend. Like, it's very much in the public eye. So I agree. I almost argue that we don't necessarily need this, but I'm happy to watch it. Steve, how do you feel about the showcase coming up? Any expectations or hopes?
The only hopes I have really are two things, and they are very well. One's not silly, but one is basically because they know the hype around Lady Dimitrescu. Just basically hint that she's going to be in RE-verse and watch people 180 from going, I don't like it, to, I'm going to play that now. And just news for a demo. That's literally all I want. I just want to see how it runs on current gen consoles. I know we've had RE-verse, but that's not quite the same, is it? Otherwise, hedge and bets like everyone else. I don't want massive spoilers. Like, if there's like an 11-hour reveal that we're not meant to find out until late game that's just like in the trailer, I'll be a bit good.
Yeah,
they've already told us her damn shoe size.
And her underwear colour
for all those
reason.
thirsty boys out there and girls.
Thirsty boy is me.
But no, seriously, if she gets revealed for RE-verse, watch people awesome 180 on it, because that will change the game. All right, just the sheer level of enamored that the wider community seems to be with the giant lady tyrant.
People have been tagging me in the Fortnite thing today that Aloy from Horizon is going to be in Fortnite. Just wait, because Lady D coming to Fortnite, definitely going to happen. She is the main marketing tool for sure, and happy for them to focus on her a little bit, continue and not show us anything about the other characters, the other houses, the other locations that we haven't seen.
How much of that is fan response?
Right, I mean, for sure. They definitely have lent into it.
This is going to be one of, because they've definitely leaned into it, for sure.
It'd be interesting to see if she's in it for all of about 20 minutes or something.
Right.
But yeah, Steve, you mentioned the demo. That's almost certainly going to be a part of it. They said in the original showcase back in January, I think it was, or maybe early February now, that there was going to be a demo coming for all consoles rather than just the maiden demo for PS5. So unless plans have changed, obviously that's going to be revealed, possibly even just dropped straight away. Remains to be seen what that is. Jordan, any hopes and expectations for the showcase?
Not particularly expectations. I mean, with it being so close, I don't think they'll throw out too much new information. I think it would be maybe more of a way of trying to kind of just catch those last few people who might be on the fence about getting this at launch. I obviously kind of going more into sort of the technical details, how it looks and how it performs, across the generations probably helps. But in general, I don't necessarily have expectations or setting expectations, just because I think it'll just be pretty much a bumper pack of a lot of the stuff that we've already seen, along with a few other sort of new trimmings. But I will express some caution to fans, because I believe last time that there was a kind of event like this, people did get hyped up that there might be some other announcements with release of classic games or whatever. I'll say this: just don't expect anything like that, and then you won't be disappointed.
That's the way to go.
I mean, maybe they will announce it. I don't know, but don't expect it.
There's enough going on.
How dare you tell people not to expect stuff in this day and age?
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah. Remake 4 and, release date coming this showcase, obviously. It's kind of, yeah. Yeah, there's enough coming.
It's funny that they would... I mean, I'm not going to put anything past Capcom. You know, they generally are doing a decent job nowadays. But it would be very weird to do something like that a few weeks before the release of a big game.
That would be...
To be like, another big game is coming. It would just be like, they're not going to lessen the hype on Village.
It'd be terrible business. So, ergo, it's not going to happen.
I just hope they don't, like, announce. I think the biggest concern for me is that they don't just, like, pop in, like, a look of a new look of an older character that we've seen, like a vintage character that we've known for a while. They just pop it in. You know, that's my biggest concern. I want to be surprised when I play that game.
Lady Dimitrescu coming as the first exclusive DLC for the PlayStation 5 version of Resident Evil Village. Yeah, Avengers, yeah. Let's not talk about that hot mess. God, imagine they were like, it's a live service game. You're going to level up and you're going to grind in Village.
There's... You know, Infinite Darkness is still on course for this year, the film and stuff like that. So there's plenty of other non-Village stuff that they can show and talk about. So yeah, don't expect any groundbreaking announcements outside of projects that we already know are coming this year. I agree. Speaking of which, Steve, you want to move us on?
So our next bit of news then is that IGN have actually shown direct gameplay of Village running on a PS4 Pro. This just feels like a kind of lead into hopefully the showcase.
Yeah, maybe we'll just get an extended version of that, sort of whatever it is, 4 minutes of Ethan tackling the sort of, I guess, like sword wielding weird skeletal guys in the basement. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Didn't show too much. I appreciate that. I have a PS4 Slim, and that's the console that I've bought the game for. PS5 upgrade included. Very happy with that when I finally am able to get my hands on one of those elusive machines. So I hope my console runs it decently. I don't know what the real, what degree of a jump it is really from the PS4 Slim to the PS4 Pro, but it looks fine for me. So if it runs like that, even maybe slightly lesser, I'll be alright. I'm not huge on 8K. I'm not really that bothered. Yeah, Steve, what did you think of the brief look?
Honestly, pretty nice. I like the general feel that it's not. While it's meant to be an action-focused game, Ethan still seems clunky as all balls. That's great. He's got a very swish tactical reload, which is obviously the talk of the town. He's had some gun training finally. He knows how to operate firearms. Well, he's been through a lot. The main takeaway I had was that my feet felt cold, because Ethan spends the majority of it walking through what appears to be like a river of blood. And I felt literally some kind of weird diegeticness to myself, and I was like, why do I feel cold? Otherwise, yeah, it's just like, that looks good. I'll give it a go if there's a demo.
You want to get the foot bath out for that bit, really immerse yourself.
Sod your candle, let's get your Resident Evil foot bath.
It's going to be the collector's edition.
James, what did you think of the gameplay shown here?
Oh yeah, I'm so excited for this game, guys.
Good.
Yeah, I just that first shot of her going up the stairs, I was like, what happened? Whoa. I don't think it was just given enough, and not too much. It's like, why did she just bring you in? She knows you're there, right? Why? Yeah, I loved it. It wasn't much to show, but yeah, I can't say much else. That's already been said. I can't wait for this game to come out and get lost in it. Because I really do feel like, I had a thought today. I was like, is this going to be my favorite Resident Evil? And it's not, we joke about Lady D and stuff, but this aesthetic in this game is my aesthetic. It looks fantasy and gothic and so cool, and there's all kinds of different characters in it, right, that are so different, right? I feel like this game is probably going to be one of my favorites. And that's without it even coming out yet.
That's a good sign, and it's accessible to everyone. As I just said, I'm getting on PS4, and hopefully, it looks like it runs decent on a PS4 Pro, so in theory, it's going to run all right on the previous gen consoles, as they're called now, and it's on the current gen consoles. It's also been announced that it's coming to Stadia, so if you are a Stadia user, you can pick it up on that as well. So it's getting wide flung, doing the typical Capcom thing. Everybody's going to be able to get their hands on it, so that's good. Adam, what did you think of the gameplay? If you've seen this,
I didn't watch it because I don't want to watch it.
That's fair.
But I will say, just in terms of like everyone's talking about like current gen and a new gen or whatever, or I guess old gen. I mean, we know that the Resident Evil engine works extremely well on, you know, the Xbox One, the PS4. So I'm not too worried about it. I think it'll probably look good. It's funny that this is going to be like it feels like we've been doing this podcast forever, but we haven't, obviously. And this is like the first new Resident Evil game we'll have to review.
Absolutely.
Outside of like remakes. So it's going to be very interesting. This is like going to be a special game for all of us, I think, in that case, where we're like, remember that time? Like, hopefully we have many.
I already feel that way about it, so I totally get you.
I'm very excited. I love the aesthetic as well. You know, gothic, vampire-y kind of stuff is very cool. So, you know, excited.
Jordan, did you watch this clip? What did you think of it?
No, I haven't seen it. To be honest, I have seen screenshots of the sort of the differences between the versions. I think generally it seems like they're targeting a good experience across both, which is great. I mean, it's partly expected because they're pretty familiar with the engine at this point.
Right, this is true.
Also, the architecture between what is last gen and what is next gen is actually it's not too far off. So the transition between the two is not that much. So the great news is that they were able to come out and say that they were going to have last gen versions, and it's completely valid. You'll be able to order those games and they'll play and they'll be as enjoyable as next gen versions.
Yes, 100%.
So our last piece of news then, Johannes Roberts has revealed the title and some tidbits of info regarding the upcoming Resident Evil film, which has now been delayed to November 24th.
So this was a short interview with IGN. I'm just going to run down sort of like the most important things that I picked up out of it. The film is Welcome to Raccoon City is the title. Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. He's implied that it's good. At least the bulk of the plot is going to take place over the course of one night, which is interesting. As we know, it's an adaptation of Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2, so it's possible that those events are sort of going to overlap now and take place at the same time, perhaps, or maybe one is going to be shown in flashbacks. He has cited John Carpenter as an influence for his direction, which is probably a good sign because the series has taken influence from him for the games. He said practical effects were being used primarily on set with CGI to build off of that. Also probably a good thing indeed. There were fixed camera angle references when filming stuff for the mansion, which is intriguing. And he seemed to imply that he kind of hoped that this would start a new franchise of films. You can watch the 5 or 6 minute interview that he did on YouTube with IGN. But that's the high points, at least. For me, not massively keen on the name, I'll be honest. But maybe it's a bit B-movie-ish, but maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. It's hard to say until we've actually seen the film. Maybe it'll work better, I don't know. Yeah, I'm interested. All of these things are I'm like, okay, that intrigues me, either for the right reasons or in terms of making the plot overlap like that. I'm at least interested to see how it's going to work. We've talked about it before. It's quite a lot to take on for one film. Just turning one of these games into a film is quite a task. Kind of doing RE1 and RE2 at the same time. Yeah, we'll see how well that goes. I'm interested to see how it turns out. Adam, how do you feel about the film, which, as Steve said, has now been pushed back to November? What's the hype level for you?
I don't know still. I gotta wait on this one. I don't think I'll be hyped at all about it, but I will watch it.
For sure.
I'm just like, I've been burnt too many times with Paul W.S. Anderson, so I know this is a different director and stuff, but I don't trust adaptations normally. Like, it might be fine. It's probably not going to be like a great movie. Let's hope it's a decent movie. When they say they're doing all practical effects, I just keep thinking that they're just like rummaging around in the closet to find that old Nemesis suit from whichever
jeez,
one
no.
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just going to put a trench coat and a fedora on him and be like, okay, that's good enough for Mr. X. So,
Crikey.
but Welcome to Raccoon City is a horrible name. It doesn't do anything for people who aren't familiar with the series, which is what you really want for an adaptation. You don't want to be too meta. But yeah, it's just a very odd name for a zombie movie. I guess they're just gonna piggyback off of the fact that the Resident Evil games are like Resident Evil films were such like box office hits that people will know it's Resident Evil.
I think they put the subtitle in obviously because they don't want to necessarily confuse it with the other film. But yeah, I don't know if it's the right subtitle for me. Part of me almost says, wouldn't it be? Every people are going to hate this. If you want to give it a subtitle, give it something short and snappy. Call it, I don't know, Resident Evil Outbreak. Steve, what do you think of the?
That makes sense.
What do you think of the info so far for the latest film?
The name is stupid. Like the name is. I mean, it feels like it's because Paul W.S. Anderson's nicked all the other ones that are like, stereotypical cannon fodder, like, Vendetta, Retribution, Biscuit Tin. So...
Bucket of sand.
Bucket of sand, but yeah, just calling it Resident Evil would probably work. I mean, it's been, what, a million billion years since the first one?
Nearly 20 years. Nearly 20 years.
Oh, God, is that grey hair I can feel? My hype level's still like lukewarm because as much as we've seen set photos and I think there's a poster collage now, which I'm not right funny, Distant Memories has done more compelling stuff, and they're a writer by trade normally anyway. So I want to see a trailer.
Yeah,
like show me a trailer, or I will not give two flying about this.
It's got to be coming, right? This summer maybe we'll get the trailer. If not, this week, I think.
I mean, being delayed is a good sign for me because I feel like they probably need to put more work on it with the pandemic and stuff. Citing Carpenter as an influence is great, but it depends which Carpenter films you're going to try and riff on because not all of them are bangers. I'm looking at you, Ghost of Mars.
I think it was stuff like The Fog and. Is it Assault on Precinct 13? Is that one of his films?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, that is a good one.
That's a great movie.
He talked about how the RPD section is going to be a bit more like the Assault film, whereas the Mansion segments are much more creepy and horror focused. So that's quite interesting.
So you've got me excited just by saying the phrase Assault on Precinct 13. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, okay. I'll give you benefit of the doubt for now. But trailer, please.
Yeah, it's interesting about the delay because at the time of the interview, I think it had been brought forward by a week. It definitely had been brought forward by some point, and they seem pretty solid in terms of that release date. And then literally a week later, it stumbles back by almost 3 months, which is quite interesting. Jordan, what do you think of what we know so far about this film?
Well, with regards to the date, I mean, I would hazard to guess that it might have something to do with the sort of the reopening film industries, the cinema industry. As more and more countries start to look at how they're going to ease lockdown measures over the summer, going into autumn and such. So it could well be that. With regards to the name, I mean, I'm not going to go that hard on it because I honestly don't think you have much room with regards to making a film adaptation of Resident Evil and not going with a name that has either already been taken or it sounds like just a very cheap derivation of those. I mean, I think the most you could maneuver to kind of come up with something that, in the sense of film, is perhaps new is Biohazard. If you just started calling it Biohazard, I mean, the fans would know what it is, but general audiences wouldn't. So that's a little bit of an issue. Welcome to Raccoon City is pretty lame. Sounds like a placeholder.
It does, yeah.
So, I mean, they've got an extended period of time right now. If they want to change the name, it's up to them.
It's got big made-for-TV movie energy.
yeah, and I echo the sentiments here that there's some hesitance to be excited about this, even though it seems like in terms of the people attached, they have their hearts in the right places. I think it's just in general, gamers have a bit of a hesitance to film adaptations just from the history of it. That it always seems to be a case that movie studios are happy to pick up the rights of these popular video games, but they don't necessarily kind of treat the source material with the kind of confidence and respect that perhaps it deserves.
Have you not seen Super Mario Brothers the movie? It's so close to the game, it's unbelievable.
I watch it every weekend. But yeah, the fact that they're combining sort of the plot of 2 Resident Evil games is a bit concerning to me. I get it; they happen around the same time and in the same city, but at the same time, both of those games have split plots. They're already going on 2 different narrative paths, and if you're trying to remain faithful to those games, you then have to split that again. So you could be looking at 4 separate character paths throughout a film, a 2-hour film that you're trying to establish an entire universe for. And yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant to be excited about that, just because I don't know how they're going to do it. I mean, if they pull it off, it will be fantastic. But it feels like there's going to be things that are going to be thrown by the wayside, and that's my concern.
Yeah, it's worth saying as well, as you said about it being pushed back potentially for cinema-related reasons. I think they've announced that this is launching exclusively in cinema. At least that's the plan at the moment. That it won't be getting a streaming service launch as well, like many films have this year and last year. So yeah, they are looking to bring people to the cinema and make some of their budget back that way. James, what do you think so far of the film and of the title of the film?
Yeah, the title is not great, but as we've discussed, like, there's not really much to choose from without confusing the viewer base. Everything's been used. But Welcome to Raccoon City, KDB said it in the chat, like, it does sound like an episode title.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It sounds like, because that's what I thought it was, by the way. When I first saw the picture, I was like, and then they put the title, I thought, oh, that's the title of the first episode. That's cool.
They're making the Wesker Kids Netflix show. It sounds like the title of that more than the film.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, that's cool. One thing I do disagree on, though, is but I am slightly biased. I've seen pictures, and I'm not going to go into them too much, of the BTS and stuff, and there is a lot of practical effects that is being used, a lot, and they put a lot into the cordoned off entire areas of a town to do certain stunts and certain events and stuff, and they've used existing buildings to house. So you're going to see some differences to the game, but they probably change it inside and stuff. But I also know that when it comes to the practical effects, one of my friends who's in it, sat in a chair for 4 hours to get to turn into a zombie. So they're putting in the work.
That's cool.
That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm not going to be too hype about it. I think it's going to be delayed again.
Interesting.
Because typically, by now we would have got at least 1 trailer, right? Sometimes even 2 from any film. But yeah, and then to tack onto that as well, and I'm going to reiterate what I said in a previous podcast, but Resident Evil is a great, Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 are great. They're great games, but there are not that many story beats to follow, right? So I think it can be easily put into a 2.5-hour film, 2-hour film.
It just sort of depends on what the pacing they're going for, I suppose.
Yeah, you're right, and if they do it right as well. So I do think it can be done. Whether they can do it is another matter, but I'm not going to get too excited about it. I'm more excited about Infinite Darkness.
Yeah, that's fair.
We have located the first aid spray listeners. Release the leather, daddy!
Okay, so finally, before we move on to the main topic, I'm going to do a bite-sized discussion almost. What a nice little throwback. this podcast records what we assumed was after the end of the REverse beta, but it does appear now that it's going to be up for another couple of days. I just wanted to take a little bit of time to give my thoughts on it. I know out of the panel that I was the only person that managed to get any time with it. I guess that's point of discussion number one is the state of the servers themselves. It's been kind of a shame, to be honest. First day was very spotty. Just a lot of the game telling you your internet isn't good enough or whatever. Maybe checking your internet's disconnected, and eventually getting a game. So they took the servers down for, I don't know, 12 hours or so. On the second day, it was a lot better for me personally, and a lot of people that I know that were playing on PS4 and Xbox at least tended to get games pretty fast and with very little in terms of fail rate. And I was streaming at the time actually when they decided they were going to take it back down again until the next morning, which is a shame. Obviously there were some issues there. I don't remember them announcing beforehand that they were going to be doing it for certain hours of the day. I don't think that was the plan, but I don't know that for sure. Maybe I just missed that information, but I feel like we would have picked up on that. But it became the norm after that point where they would open it for a few hours, 6 hours a day or whatever, and then close it down to sort of iron out the kinks, which is important. Obviously, this is an open beta that it's there for this reason, so when the game actually comes out into the hands of the public, it will be, hopefully, pretty playable. But it is a shame because it meant that a lot of the time, especially because they're working out of Japan, time zones didn't necessarily match up with people. I know a lot of the people on our server, especially over in the Americas, had issue because it was open when they were at work and stuff like that, or whilst they were asleep. So a lot of people missed it. So it's good that they've opened it for a few more days coming up this week, so people might get a chance finally, or another chance to play it. That being said, I had a good few hours on it, three or 4 hours worth of playtime, and I've been very open-minded about it. Obviously on the podcast ever since. I think it's good for the series to try different things, and having spoken to the Oracle Dragon on the podcast about her experience with the closed beta, and having watched some video footage that other people have captured, getting my hands on it was exactly what I expected it to be, and I had a wonderful time, and I'm happy to say definitely wasn't the only one on the server. It's not for everyone. If you don't like multiplayer, like online shooters at all, if you are venomously opposed to them, you probably won't get on with it. But the best description we came up with it for was it's kind of like Mario Kart, in the sense that you can be right down the bottom. It's a short, all the games are about 5 minutes long, or at least the mode that we got to play, which was the standard deathmatch. And then somewhere close to the end, you could skyrocket to the top. I've gone from 4th and 5th place out of 6 all the way to the top on one life before. It's all about which other players you kill. You get more points for people higher up the leaderboard. You get more points for reclaiming your kill streak by killing the person that killed you last. Obviously, there's the aspect of playing as BOW. Yeah, it's manic fun. It'll be interesting to see how it balances out. It'll be interesting to see what it's like when there's actual matchmaking with different levels of experience in it. But overall, I had a good time. The characters were generally fun to play as. Couldn't get on with Ada, but I saw some players that were really, really good as her, so maybe she's just one of those characters. The BOWs are really fun to play as. Yeah, really interested to see what this game has in store in terms of other gameplay modes, in terms of other maps, potential updates. As Steve said with Lady D, I think you'd almost be stupid not to have a village pack come at some point with some village BOWs and playable Chris or Ethan. I mean, obviously it's third person, so don't know how if they're giving Ethan a face or what.
What would his move be? Sorry, I just not to derail, but what would Ethan's move be?
They'll figure something out. Some of the ones we throw on the characters don't make a whole. I don't know why Claire has like an electric ball of stunning. It's great. Okay, she's one of the most OP characters because of it. But even if they have to invent things, it's fine. That being said, some of it's kind of like Resistance. There's some really clever nods in there. Like RE7 Chris has the Joe Baker punching electric glove thing, and Jill's got the hot dogger and stuff like that. It's very well put together. The short version is I had fun with it. It probably isn't for everyone. Your mileage may vary. I've seen a lot of people trashing on it just because it is what it is. I would wager, you know, these people A, haven't tried it, or B, it's not really for them anyway. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's absolute crap. It's just not your thing. I'm not typically an online multiplayer person, but because it was so wild, I really did have a good time. It'd be interesting to see also how long that lasts, like how many hours you're going to be able to put into this before it gets old. But playing with other people, and if you do want to play RE-verse with other people, we welcome you with open arms to our server. We're going to have many people who are playing the game across PS4 and Xbox, and probably PC too, hopefully. So if you do want to try it with other people, please join us.
Sorry, can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
In your opinion, because I haven't played the game, but I will do. In your opinion, what is it? Is it like any other game out there? Is it similar to anything else?
That's hard for me to answer because I don't play a lot of online shooters anyway. Like, it'd be very easy for me to say something like, oh, it's like Overwatch because it's characters with different skills. But I don't really know that. I've only really played Overwatch for all of about half an hour. And I don't think it is like that. It's got its own uniqueness to it, but it's hard for me to compare it to something because, yeah, I don't really have a lot of experience to compare it with.
In terms of third-person shooters, it's got a very unique hook in its comeback mechanic. When you die, you come back as a BOW. Mm-hmm. But depending on how many vials you found throughout the arena, you will be a different kind of BOW, which I believe you can pick off so many for so many vials.
Yeah,
so
well, you can't pick.
USP.
It's randomized. So if you've got 0 vials, you'll always come back as a fat molded, and they are useless. They are kind of hilarious, but they're useless. And that's I actually kind of like that. It's intentional. It forces you to move around the map and seek these vials out that regenerate over time. They're always in the same places, but if someone swipes one, it won't be back until, I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute later, I guess. If you've picked up 1 vial, you come back as the Hunter Gamma from Remake 3, which is really fast. And yeah, it's got like a cool one-hit kill move. And Jack Baker, same thing. He's got these wild swings with these giant scissors, and he can welcome to the family Sun you in the face with his fist. And if you pick up 2 vials, it's Nemesis or the Super Tyrant, which is kind of hilarious. Running around as, like, actually getting to play as Nemesis and blow up. Get to blow up Jill, get to blow up Leon and all that. And Super Tyrant, who we've never played as. Yeah, I had a great time. It was just mental.
Yeah. Did you say that it's still going? It's still got ongoing, this beta?
Yeah, they tweeted this morning that it's going to be open between the 14th and 16th of April. So at the time of sort of releasing this podcast, it will be ongoing now, but not for long. But the game is out 3 weeks out. Those 3 weeks will fly. Once you're done with Village, see you online that weekend, I suppose. That's my plan.
Any thoughts on the filter? Because that's always a point of contention.
100%. Yeah, I turned it off for all of about 45 seconds. I would have turned it back on longer if I wasn't in the middle of a match. So I had to find somewhere in a corner to hide to turn it back on. It's pretty much unplayable without the comic book filter as far as I'm concerned. It's just too dark. And the comic book filter just adds to the style of it because it is a silly, fun shooter. So yeah, it looks all right. It looks okay with it. It looks good. It looks a whole lot better with it than without it. All right, cool. Well, with that out of the way then, let's move on to our main discussion for this podcast, which is Beta Builds 3.5. And now, reading the file Management Trainee's Diary from Resident Evil 0, Luigi, who you can find at twitch.tv/LEWIGIE.
What is it that Director Marcus is researching all the time? And what's with his weird interest in leeches? Interest seems more like love at times. Rumour has it that there's something dangerous about those leeches. It is true that when Dennis just touched one, he got ill with fever. Again, today, there were those horrible moans beyond that door. Let's sleep in dogs. No way I'll go near them. Even if the director tells me to, I don't want to end up like Dennis. That poor bastard. Scratching and scratching makes me itch just watching him. Must maybe go. If can, but how? Dennis gone. I go. Hungry. Help! Mom.
Alright, so we are back with some beta builds. In our previous season we talked about Resident Evil 1.5 and the footage we've seen for that, and the playable version. We don't necessarily have the benefit of a playable version of what has become known as Resident Evil 3.5, but we do gladly have some places to look for information. So shout out to CVX Freaks, Itchy Tasty, just a general shout out as well. Congratulations on the launch of his hardcover Resident Evil history book, which is excellent and I do recommend. As well as our friends over at Crimson Head, George Trevor has an amazing article that he's very proud of, and as he should be, about the development of Resident Evil 4 and the betas behind it, contributions from all over the community. It's very dense and it's very interesting if you are into the sort of minutiae of what went on behind the scenes at Capcom. So we will be referring to that repeatedly ad nauseum throughout this discussion, I'm sure. But let's start first things first. So the first Resident Evil 4 actually started off as Resident Evil 3. As soon as Kamiya was done with Resident Evil 2, he was tasked with directing the next game. And then Resident Evil 1.9, as it was known then, which is Jill's last escape from Raccoon City, was titled Resident Evil 3 to strike whilst the RE franchise was hot. And Kamiya's next-gen PS2 project, as it was at the time, became Resident Evil 4. However, Kamiya's disinterest in horror drove the game in a different direction. It was more action-packed. They used the word stylish to describe it so much that the early build of it was just called the stylish RE4 beta. Its protagonist would have had supernatural powers, perhaps been one of the sons of Oswell E. Spencer, but at one point it got so far away from Resident Evil and its DNA that Mikami turned around and said, maybe we should just turn this into something else, and thus Devil May Cry was born. So the first question then, it's not necessarily what do you think of Devil May Cry. That's going to be a subject for a podcast down the road at some point, of course, with its connection to Resident Evil. We'll certainly get there, I'm sure. But for those of you who have played DMC, do you feel like it is connected to Resident Evil of that era? Do you feel that it was at one point a Resident Evil game, or is it so far beyond that that it's definitely its own standalone thing? Is there any ties almost to the RE history? Steve, I know you're a fan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Maybe not in the way the combat plays, like whole diving around, shooting, stabbing things, but the locations themselves are very akin to, you could have put them in a Resident Evil game and got away with it.
Right.
I think the structure of the game, in the way that Dante has to get around the environment and find a key item to move forward, and it's almost like a set act structure to it. You go from the big castle building and then out into the courtyard and through a wrecked ship, then back into the castle, and then you go into quote unquote hell. Supplant hell with some umbrella lab, and it's almost like bang on in terms of how the game would progress. Is it as puzzly complex? No, because it's an action game.
Right.
But the way the aesthetics work, and some of the if you listen to the soundtrack, I would argue some of the ambient soundtracks are not the battle stuff. That's always like kick the living daylights out of monster stuff. Could actually pass for scarier than some of the ambient soundtracks in the released version of Resident Evil 4, in my opinion.
Interesting. I've only played it for like an hour and a half, to be honest. I do need to get into it, but sort of one of the opening pieces of music is like genuinely, there's a sample in it that got reused for RE4. They used the same disc, so that's quite interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else besides. Obviously it's a massive Gothic architecture castle, and then I'm pretty sure some of the promo arts for 3.5 then get reused. Like Spencer's bedroom is a room in Devil May Cry or something very similar to it. But obviously it's not Spencer's bedroom in Devil May Cry. I think the general feeling I have, and I don't know how true it is that there's probably bits and pieces of leftover developments from these non-starter versions of RE4 that get recycled into DMC 1, but don't quote me on that.
Interesting.
That's just a Steve theory, beards for watching.
I haven't kept up with the series, but I played the original game all the way through. I would just say that if that is the direction the Resident Evil went, I think that it would be dead for me. I think Resident Evil would not be something I would would be interested in
fair
nowadays.
enough.
Not that I think Devil May Cry is bad. It's just such a tonal shift in terms of
Right.
its gameplay.
I think also when it was decided that it was going to be a whole other franchise, that's really when they could just let the leash off. And some of those
True.
changes happened after that, when they went, well, if it's a standalone thing, we might as well make it its own thing entirely and separate them. Two different products for Capcom, right? So, Jordan, what do you think?
Well, I think there's definitely some imprint of earlier Resident Evil design that you can see in Devil May Cry, particularly as well from the mostly fixed camera angles. I know they have a sort of a certain dynamic nature in the way that they follow Dante around, but it's weird because I think if you had sort of kind of given it some kind of spin-off Resident Evil name or something like that, as terms of the actual content, it may not feel like it's connected, but it's similar to a lot of other sort of like Resident Evil-esque games of the time, in that it's like, oh, it's like it's got notions of Resident Evil, but not quite. I mean, it's important, I think, to point out as well with the director that, to my knowledge, I don't think he's ever actually followed up a sequel. Like, obviously, he's had certain games that have produced sequels, but I don't think he's actually personally taken them on as director. He's always seemingly moving on to another project. I think even with Bayonetta 2, I think he was already working on Scalebound at the time. So he does strike me as somebody who doesn't necessarily kind of attach himself to any particular franchise. I could be wrong with Bayonetta 3, but still he kind of likes to kind of veer off and try something completely different, something completely new. And while obviously there's his DNA throughout all of the games that he's produced, it wouldn't surprise me to some extent if that notion of sort of going for something so utterly different is what drove him and his team to kind of separate themselves so much from what Resident Evil was about.
Right. Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that as well, because the book that I referenced there, Itchy Tasty, does actually say that when Mikami and Kamiya and a few others left Capcom, it was really about not following franchises. They wanted to make original installments. So I'd be inclined to believe that it's very much about striking out on something new every time, and that's why they went to form their own studio at that time. So with that out of the way, let's move on to the next version of RE4, which a lot of these have two names. So this is sometimes called the Fog version or the Castle version. This was directed by Hiroshi Shibata, who would be director for RE4 for quite a long time. He based a lot of his ideas around the sensation Mogaki. It's a Japanese word that doesn't quite have a literal translation. RE3 director Karamura said in an interview, Shibata had a very clear concept when he described seeking the horror. He had the image of the horror of Mogaki, or struggling. It can be difficult to directly translate this Mogaki word into its exact meaning, but it is a situation in which you try to wriggle with your whole body in fear but cannot escape. He seemed to want me to create not just physical Mogaki, but rather a state where Leon couldn't resist mental or psychological pains and difficulties. A kind of Mogaki that's simultaneously mental and physical. The first trailer for RE4 was this version of the game, dropped at TGS 2002. Quite simply, the question with this one is, what do you guys think of the quite brief trailer that features Leon walking around a castle, clutching at his arm in pain? It talks about possession and infection, the cradle of progenitor, which we'll get to, and being stalked by these tendrils of gas almost. Adam, what did you think? What do you think of this trailer? Eva, what did you think of it then? What do you think of it now?
I came to these kind of trailers definitely later than when they were kind of out and about and people were talking about them, really. But to me it looks great. reminds me a lot of like what we feel about Resident Evil at that point, you know, between 3 or whatever and 4. It's just very interesting. It's hard to have a lot to say about it because this one is so short.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that the next one there'll be a lot more to it.
Oh yeah.
That we get into, which is I think the one that is captured people's imaginations a lot more than this one. But you know, to me, it's a shame we didn't get both or all of these versions because they all have something going on. You know, there's not a lot I can say about this one really, but just that I wish I could have played it.
James, what do you think of this trailer?
Yeah, I really like it, and as Adam said, like it really captures. And you know, I've spoken about this a couple of times, but you know, back then. Sorry if you can hear my cat snoring. I apologize. But back then, like Resident Evil had a feeling about it. You know, you had a lot of games that were like that. So you had like Parasite Eve, you had Silent Hill, and like those games. Like whenever I was talking to people about it, or I go to Choices Videos or Blockbuster or whatever else, video renting establishment, like just looking at them would give me anxiety. Right. And when I watched that trailer, I was transported back to those feelings, and it was very nostalgic. I was like, oh wow. I'll talk about it more later with the hallucination version as well, but like I was transported back to that time and that feeling of terror and horror. Yeah, and I want to just quickly, and I'll talk about it more later, but I don't want everybody else thinks, but the Leon in these versions so much better than the RE4 Leon and how he looks. He looks like, if you just like his hair, like is the same, but his face is like it's so much clearer and a cleaner copy, right, of RE2. Like it looks better than the RE2. Looks better than the actual retail RE4 from these two games.
Disagree. I'm going to disagree because I think that the mummy jacket looks like it's okay, but it's not as unique. It looks like Brendan Fraser's jacket to a T.
No, what I mean is the face itself.
The face?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like if you put his face next to, like, I'm forgetting because they really, like, that was inspired by, you know, things they wanted to do, but like if you put RE2 Leon's face up against these two, Hallucination and the Castle, they look very similar, right? And that was one of my criticisms of RE4 retail, is that they didn't. Like he just didn't. He looked like a different Leon. He also acted like a different Leon. It was like a different.
That's par for the course for Leon every game.
But I'll talk a bit more later about what I think about that, because I have some ideas as well.
Interesting. Steve, what do you think of this trailer?
Compelling. Like I had this trailer on some kind of like video hard drive back in the day, and I watched it a lot before RE4's proper release. I think I mentioned this before. And yeah, no, the environments and the sweeping shots and that dang hallway with the curtains, like one handing a magnum like a complete psychopath. He's it's fantastic, and for me, you know. It feels like that. As much as I love Resident Evil 4 retail, I do, hands down. I have no real qualms with it, except for some narrative beats that, yeah, this has that kind of like, that je ne sais quoi, that feeling of a Resident Evil game of that era. It feels very much like the next step after remake, whereas 4 feels a step in a very different direction entirely. This feels like an evolution of remakes concepts, visually speaking.
It's RE4 is, in a way, not to disparage it, it's kind of like a lateral step. Like it was onto a different path completely, diagonally, if you like. This does feel like a through line, like the logical continuation of stuff like Remake and Code Veronica, and a massive step at that.
I mean, if they, obviously it's not going to happen, don't get your hopes up, Steve, but if they would ever release something like this now, people would still take it, Capcom. We'd love a horror game set in a spooky house with spooky curtains and Leon bumbling around with a torch and, you know, not Ouroboros showing up and kicking the crap out of him. I know it's not Ouroboros. Like, it may have led to some inspiration down the line. I don't know, but
May have.
All right. It's a black tentacle mass. It could have been H.P. Lovecraft's ghost.
Jordan, what do you think of this trailer?
Well, I only actually I've actually seen the trailer recently because when I grew up, I think it was just I'd only seen it in magazines, so
Right,
like
same.
screenshots and stuff like that. And it looked fantastic. Like, I mean, like the atmosphere was killer, and it was right around that time where you know, developers are really starting to sort of get a handle on lighting and effective lighting in the sort of the PlayStation 2 GameCube era. But as far as its subject matter, it's such a drastic departure, and I can't shake that because you have to try and connect from the last time we'd seen Leon, which I presume is the end of Resident Evil 2, when he's saying, "Hey, it's up to us to take out Umbrella." I don't think he necessarily meant, "Hey, it's up to me to go to a castle alone and be chased by some smoke tentacle." I don't think that was necessarily in his plans. It is so drastic, and I think if they went in that direction, obviously I think it would be a very dramatic turn for the series. We would not be where we are now.
Absolutely.
It would probably still be around, and it would still be successful. It just would be in a completely different direction. And it's funny because we often look at Resident Evil 4 as, I mean, I've even heard people argue, is it Resident Evil? And in comparison to this, yes, it is. It absolutely is. It's far closer to the kind of path that's been laid out by the previous games, in my opinion. So, I mean, it's very compelling, and the ideas that they already had sort of established is what's so fascinating about sort of like going back and having, reading the different interviews and stuff like that, is that they really have a pretty concrete idea about what was going on in this trailer, even if as you watch it, you don't necessarily know what's going on.
Yeah.
That surprised me because you often look at this beta footage, and especially with a lot of this beta footage for Resident Evil 3.5, I often just thought, oh, this is like tech demo. This is purely to just sort of show us how they're handling lighting, or what kind of environments they want to work with. They don't actually have a story. They don't actually have necessarily a whole gameplay design ready to go, and yet they did. It was really quite established, and I suppose that makes sense given the time that it was obviously being released, 2002, 2003. That's a pretty obviously close timeline to the actual retail release. But I suppose I just took it for granted back in the day. It was just sort of, especially because of how adverse they are from each other, the different ideas that are being thrown out.
Yeah. In terms of Leon's most recent appearance, it's funny that you say that, because at the time it would have been Gaiden, which wouldn't have been deemed as non-canon officially yet, because there wouldn't have been any lead-ups that kind of determined that. I mean, maybe you could make that assumption because it wasn't made by the core team or anything like that. But it does end with, spoiler alert for a 20-year-old Game Boy game, Leon having some kind of infection, possibly. That's the implication. So, possibly could have rolled into this, but most likely that it just a coincidence. But yeah, I'm glad that you touched upon the fact that it does look kind of like a tech demo. It does, but it does have a story. So, the plot of this version was the same as the stylish build, essentially, about investigating Spencer's castle. That was pretty much the setting. New elements for this version, which would actually wind up in the final game, were things like Leon's infection. In this case, the gas-based virus was actually due to be created by HCF, which is the company that Wesker was working for in Code Veronica, so that would have been a nice little through line, rather than those three letters go dormant until RE7. The build would have also featured a female character, also infected, and a dog companion. However, this is so far before the final build that they weren't Ashley or the dog necessarily from the beginning of the game. Those two parts actually went on to be reused in Haunting Ground, is the general belief. I think there's conflicting stories about that. But importantly...
the shoe fits, even if it isn't true. It's
Oh,
very...
100%. Yeah, if it wasn't directly lifted, most likely developers got that inspiration from messing around with it. But yes, the trailer features the words "the cradle of the progenitor," hinting that RE4 would have answered lots of questions about the origins of Umbrella and the progenitor virus. How do we feel about this this established idea of a story, sort of Leon going into Spencer's home, I suppose, to take down the old man himself, I guess, or perhaps to look for an antidote to what ails him. Since RE4 is such a separate entity from the rest of the series, as we talked about, it sort of cuts the ties to the rest of the story, and then it would only be through later entries that it would be re-established into sort of how it fits into the wider canon. With all of the previous games promising to take down Umbrella, and this kind of was meant to be that follow-up almost, or at least a dive into the company's history and leader. Cheated is a very strong word, but Steve, how do you feel about this proposed story at the time?
Intriguing, and obviously more hitting in the right direction. While I don't think it would have led to the actual taking down of Umbrella, because it feels like you're walking through a tomb being stalked by tentacles and fog, it generally has the kind of feel, that kind of atmosphere for the time. I'm more interested overall with like what would have happened to Leon regarding this infection he's got, because there's various images, isn't there? If I'm growing a tentacle arm.
Right, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about him having a 7-foot snake on his arm and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, there's like an interview with like Paul Mercier about it or something, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point I'll probably bring up later, actually, talking about Paul Mercier's involvement.
Okay, interesting.
Overall, though, like the plot, like it feels almost like, this is going to sound mean, but omitting the STARS members and, not having the whole gang together, for an Avengers-style takedown in my head is a bit of a missed opportunity, but I suppose that's just the way games were back then.
Yeah, I don't know. Especially back then, you didn't really get sort of ensemble cast games, really, that I can think of. Not in
Leon gets kicked in the knee, he falls over, and then, on the radio, on your left, and then a boulder appears, gets punched, Chris comes out, Avengers theme starts playing. I don't know.
Going solo is more like a Belmont thing in Castlevania.
Yeah. Jordan, what do you think of the proposed plot?
See, the thing is, on the face of it, it actually kind of feels like it could be definitive. I mean, going after Spencer, it feels like that's the big bad. But yeah, as you say, it doesn't necessarily seem like it would pan out that way, and it wouldn't make sense to kind of end it there. So I struggle to imagine what the end game would have been for this game in that current version, and also where it would lead the series with relation to Umbrella. But I mean, as we've seen, obviously, in the real Resident Evil timeline, that there's all kinds of twists and turns. But it's hard to imagine. It's very compelling, the idea of it, especially the way that it was delving so deeply in something that wasn't purely zombies. But beyond that, it's just hard for me to imagine, really.
Apparently, RE4 was always going to be the end of Umbrella. That's been the talk anyway. So there was always plans to move on from that, and maybe they felt that fighting a company was a finite thing. Which, I can understand that perspective. To be fair, fighting corporation. So maybe taking down the founder. I guess it does make sense. Adam, what do you think of the proposed plot for RE4 at this time?
Yeah, like you literally just said, I know that RE4 was always supposed to be the end of Umbrella. I don't know if it was I don't know how we got to end of Umbrella in pre-game or what, because obviously what we're seeing now in that doesn't scream Umbrella to me. Not this trailer with fog monsters and stuff.
Yeah,
I know true. Umbrella have gone some pretty wacky places, but it's hard to imagine just how all of these kinds of pre Resident Evil 4 kind of snippets we've seen, they all have much more supernatural vibes.
Yeah.
Obviously, as we get into the next one, that's going to be way more apparent. But yeah, it's hard to believe that it's like an Umbrella thing. I feel like they wanted just to drop it and be like, now it's a ghost story or whatever.
It is interesting. The gas monster thing or whatever. As I said, it's not actually an Umbrella thing. It's HCF attacks the castle,
right.
which is interesting. I thought that was quite interesting because, by coincidence, probably more than anything else, HCF were, as we find out in RE7, a part of discovering and working on the mold, which is, somewhat similar. It's unorthodox. So I thought that was quite an interesting snippet, but probably just a massive coincidence. But you're right, because it's very untraditional. It's not like any of these trailers have any zombies or anything, which we'll, as you say, we'll get to. James, what do you think of the proposed plot?
It's cool. I like the idea. However, there's still that. I mean, I know we didn't get much with the trailer, but there's still that like vast chasm of what happened, between the third game and the fourth game, which even through going through the cutscene, sorry, not the cutscenes, the screenshots and kind of the story behind this, we're not really fully.
We do know now, though, James. Yeah, it was Umbrella was short stocked by a bunch of traders, and then a bunch of people on. Yeah.
I forgot because I was told at the beginning of every single film, but I still forgot.
This is my timely meme. I'm on time with this one, right?
I think you're safe. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I'm relevant.
But yeah, like I would have liked. But in terms of like how they were going to do it, like we're told, I feel like the fog version or the castle version and the hallucination version both riffed off each other. And I feel like, they might have gone into the special, like they might have gone to the paranormal a little bit, but there's anything, you can do anything, with pseudoscience.
Right.
They'll supposedly they were playing with like a fossilized human was the base of this whole thing. I mean, I could like within 15 minutes I could draw up something that is pseudoscience-y that sounds good. Well, not good, but okay. Right, but yeah, that would make sense. But that Hookman could have been, or Hook person could have been the biological weapon of the fossilized person underneath the Spencer Mansion.
That's quite an idea. Interesting idea, yeah. I like that.
I'll tell you something that's probably going to offend a lot of people who are really keen on this version. At times, it feels like it could have been an Alone in the Dark game.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as in disrespect, because Alone in the Dark New Nightmare, until you get to the last few stages, is actually a pretty good game. The rest of the games in the series, not so much.
This is the third podcast we've recorded in a row where that series has come up. Something's going on here.
What's the feeling I'm Alone in the Dark? Just curious, just prepping for in the future.
I'm glad that you touched on that, James, because I did want to at least mention, the idea for the progenitor at that point was this fossilized human, deep underground Spencer's castle on that island, rather than what it became in RE5, the stairway to the sunflower, stuff like and Las Plagas and stuff like that. It's all on a level of pseudoscience for me where it's all fine. None of it's too unbelievable. It's all just kind of that'll do.
Yeah.
This choice of the flowers, either way, whatever works for me.
Yeah, because it's not too far from Resident Evil 5 and
exactly.
So it's clearly Resident Evil 5 is heavily inspired by these ideas. Like I wouldn't be surprised if like there was a brainstorm of previous editions, and like a lot of the ideas from these 3.5s were up there, and they were like, oh yeah, I like that. And then even with the retail version, the fossilized human that is, clearly in the game, with the fossilized bugs.
Yes.
Plagas, the fossilized plagas that you find in the game.
I do think, especially with the amount of time put into this project before they even started working on what would be the final game, not that they knew at the time, it makes sense to look back at stuff and be like, what can we use that we've already spent time on? Like, we've spent money and time on developing and designing ideas better than just chucking them in the bin. So I'm all about stuff getting reused for RE5 and such like that. Before we move on to the final and the meatiest of these builds that we're going to talk about, Steve, you said you wanted to talk a little bit about Paul Mercier.
So there's an interview with Paul Mercier in George Trevor's article on Crimson Head that basically nuts down to he did the voice for this. Like, he did the entire voicing that they did at the time for this version, including Leon apparently dying horribly, maybe, and talking about the 15-foot snake arm. But the thing that gets me is, I don't think we're going to hit on it much, but the reveal trailer for, shall we say, retail RE4 has someone else doing Leon's voice, despite the fact they're still having the same hit sounds and things. I just always found it very peculiar, because obviously Paul Mercier is Leon in RE4 after the fact as well. So probably just some trailer, MacGuffinry, because it sounds nothing like if Paul Mercier sounds like a solid "Hi, I'm Paul," the person in the whatever trailer is "Hi, I'm Leon," and it's very much clearly not the same voice actor, despite the fact that they had the same one on board.
I'll be honest,
So-
I didn't watch the sort of trailer for the actual RE4 because I was like, well, we're going to talk about the older ones, right?
There is something in that trailer that actually perplexes me a bit further, but it's literally boils down to a Ganado does a pounce attack they don't do in the game.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. Interesting is one word for
Well-
it. I'd say it's what.
Interesting for nerds like me.
There's a reason it's not in the game.
Yeah, I thought it was intriguing that he was talking about it at this point. They made that casting and they stuck with it.
They just
for
kept
several
it, which
years,
is
which is kind of cool.
ace. Paul Mercier was also in unrelated, really, in Onimusha 3 as the voice of Jean Reno's character.
Oh, nice.
So, Jean Reno was Leon in Leon the Professional, and then he did the voice for Jean Reno, and then he did the voice for Leon. So, destiny, really.
Excellent. And now, reading the file Alert Order from Resident Evil 4 in character as Bitores Mendez, Israel Blank Marino, who you can find on Newgrounds as Blank 1407.
Recently, there has been information that the United States government agent is here investigating the village. Do not let this American agent get in contact with the prisoner. For those of you not yet informed, the prisoner is being held in an old house beyond the farm. We will transfer the prisoner to a more secure location in the valley when we are ready. The prisoner is to stay here until further notice. Meanwhile, do not let the American agent near the prisoner. We do not know how the American government found out about our village, but we are investigating. However, I feel that this intrusion at this particular time is not just a coincidence. I sense a third party other than the United States government involved here. My fellow men, stay alert.
Right, so let's get to the final build. Most of the time it's called Hookman, but the internal, I think, name was Hallucination. We first saw this at Nintendo's pre-E3 conference. Shinji Mikami shows a new trailer and some gameplay of RE4 for what has now become known as the Hallucination or Hookman build. Man, I guess just open the floor for immediate thoughts to this one. James, what do you think of this presentation, this short trailer, and the fact they went, bam, here's some gameplay?
Okay, so this game looks fantastic. Like, it looks so good for that time. I mean, the previous one did too, but this one just looks so good. When I watched the AI upscaled video, sorry, I'm out of breath because I just ran upstairs to get my phone and then bring it back down again. So yeah, I really like this trailer, and like, it just looks so good. It looks so much better than the retail. And but just reading through the article, fantastic article by Crimson Head. So there was some problems with hardware that they had, and like, even though the GameCube was like the best console at the time, they had such a problem. Yes, actually, Luigi, I'll go on to that in a second. They had some real problems with that, and they were lauding themselves, saying that we're trying to achieve these things. But even with that trailer, it looks so good. And there was a point where I can't remember the name. Who was it? It was the person who was behind it. Was it
Shibata is the director at the time?
Shibata. He was talking about his inspirations for it, where the Winona Ryder movie, Lost Souls.
Yes.
And it was like they were trying to do everything they could not to mention Silent Hill. Right? Because that video, that trailer of Lost Souls, everybody should watch it, by the way, because as soon as you watch it, you're like, this is just Silent Hill.
Mm-hmm.
This is just switching to a different reality, right?
Yeah.
And like messing with those mental states. And we're going to go into other subjects after this, right? Like overall stuff. But
yeah, I've got a couple of more precise questions to ask as well.
Yeah. I want to go. Maybe I want to go into more later, right? But I think that the person, Shibata, was very apologetic about this game when it didn't go through, and they were being very, very subservient to Mikami. However, I think that Mikami actually took huge inspiration from Shibata's stuff in the retail version.
All right.
Because the El Gigante, the Verdugo, the armor you see in the game, the bats, all of that is crazy stuff. What if, because one of the lacking things about RE4, when you look back at these other versions, is the mess it was doing to Leon's mental state. What if these were literally like his callback to these other games? Him just trying to do callbacks to it, saying he's not actually fighting El Gigante. We don't know anything about the El Gigante. We don't know anything about the Verdugo, even though it's a cool monster. We only know that something was inside the plagas were inside the armor. He could fully have imagined that. The only thing that we definitely know is an actual enemy are the Ganados, right? The people. Because we've got actual history on them. We got a full freaking tapestry at the end of the game, but nothing else was shown in that tapestry. No other bugs we were seeing. So I'm wondering if that was his callback to Shibata. Maybe, it wasn't just making Leon extra angry and turning his eyes red. It was also going a little bit bonkers. And I'm wondering if that was taken out, like them explaining that more, or they just wanted the people like myself to work it out, maybe. I don't know. It is a bit far-fetched, but it's just that I've always wanted to know, and we've always wanted to know where El Gigante came from.
Right. Totally.
And all,
Spain is from Spain.
And from the village.
You've never been to Spain before? They're everywhere.
But it's like normally in Resident Evil, we get a full rundown on all of these enemies and monsters, right? But we don't from a lot of monsters in retail, RE4 retail. And Leon having a decreasing mental state because of him being injected with the Las Plagas would explain some of that.
Definitely an interesting theory. Like, as you say, this build is... the name is Hallucination. So everything that you're seeing in the trailer that Leon is going up against in combat, in theory, is in his mind, causing him such mental pain that he's feeling physical pain because of it.
Yeah. Right, I should have mentioned that at the first.
No, it's fine. I mean, I should have opened with that as well, to be fair. It is interesting, the idea that perhaps that is still in RE4. I like that theory almost. It definitely adds more weight to the Plagas storyline in Retail 4, which, face it, the sort of Leon's infection not particularly interesting. It just kind of gets resolved, like boom, done.
Yeah, Tommy Aiken occasionally hurts people he shouldn't do.
Yeah.
It's not a story-driven moment like it is in the Fog version, and hugely so in the Hallucination version.
Right, it's definitely the driving factor.
Yeah, it's nothing you can do about you. Okay, you get, without your agency is taken away, you get injected with this Las Plagas, and then later on you get it sucked out of you. That's pretty much it. You can't do anything about it.
Jordan, what do you think immediately looking at this gameplay, the aesthetic and stuff like that, and the general ideas, I suppose?
Well, obviously, this is the one that I think obviously most people are probably more familiar with. It was the one that really kind of stuck out. It's funny because like even in the sort of the following years after Resident Evil 4 came out, people are still talking about this game or this version of the game.
And I should point out, people still talk about it today pretty regularly.
Yeah, and for good reason. I think it's a fascinating concept. But as far as a piece of beta footage, it's a really interesting statement on where Capcom was in terms of their development for the next Resident Evil game, and trying to understand where exactly they were. In some ways, this actually feels like a shift back towards what would eventually be Resident Evil 4, rather than a further deviation from it. If the castle and sort of spooky smoke monsters are the kind of the extreme that they decided to take it to, this is kind of a bit like them talking themselves down to an extent, and the fact that you can kind of put it under the guise of hallucinations, it gives Capcom a bit more leeway with being able to work within that universe without necessarily making it ultra supernatural. And it can't be ignored that there's inspiration, intentional or otherwise, to the likes of Silent Hill and obviously other games that were out around the time. I know Eternal Darkness was coming out around the time that this beta footage would have surfaced shortly after it and such. There was an appetite for that more psychological thriller in games, and that developers were finding effective ways to be able to produce it. I think it's a great point to say that a lot of these functions still end up having some kind of imprint on the final retail game, and obviously the Ganados, I think, are to an extent are inspired by the way that the Hookman behaves. I mean, I don't think anything teleports necessarily, but just about everything with the way that the enemy moves.
Yeah, the animations, some of them are just wholesale used in the final game. You can tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the thing is, the Hookman, cuts a sort of a striking figure because it's the only enemy that you're facing. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that same terror that you feel when you face the regenerators for the first time. In that sense that you start off first finding them, and then they're pursuing you, and it kind of it shuts down almost everything else because all you're focused on is the Hookman and trying to take him down. I think it's got to be brought up that this looks fantastic. This is a glimpse into fixed camera Resident Evil 4 that obviously we didn't get, but clearly they could produce, and it looked really good. Because going from Remake, which obviously had pre-rendered visuals, you wouldn't necessarily think that they could produce something as faithful in terms of fidelity. But it actually looks really nice.
Yeah.
And I understand that there were technical limitations that weren't going to necessarily make it look as good if they'd went down that route, but it is a bit of a tease to kind of see what the games could have looked like if they continued to go down that road of fixed camera angles.
Yeah, that is something that I want to circle back round to, the camera and stuff. It's funny that you guys mention Silent Hill. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right to talk about Lost Souls. Karamura said in an interview with Crimson Head, in the winter of 2002, I gathered the staff and showed a scene from a horror film. It was a scene from Lost Souls, where the room started corroding blue and a killer started emerging while the main character was washing her hands at the sink. This scene, this hallucinatory vision from the character and the way the room changed in real time moved me very much emotionally, so I brought up the idea of attempting this in a game. The other inspiration, coincidentally, that this game has is Jacob's Ladder, which, as we talked about a little bit on our Silent Hill podcast, which you can find in the archives, was a big inspiration on Silent Hill as well. So absolutely, it's definitely going to have almost sort of similar DNA to that. Adam, what do you think of the way that the Hallucination and the Hookman version looks?
My first, I love the way it looks. It looks amazing. It looks like, we all want to play this game, and there's a reason for it. I would venture to say that everybody on the podcast and probably everybody listening has a fascination with the supernatural. It's what would have led us into Resident Evil with zombies and monsters. We all like it because of that hook. And like the next step on that ladder is, I love a ghost story. I love weird stuff like that. I wouldn't say I was like particularly like a believer in the supernatural, but I find it endlessly fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that wanting the end of Umbrella would have been, in this case, the chapter closing on the zombie, the monster. And I think what we were seeing was the emergence of the supernatural side of like that part of our interest. So Hallucination, I think, was just named for the movie scene, because it's a hallucinatory scene in the movie. I feel like once you start getting into hallucinations in terms of gameplay, I feel like it takes a lot of agency away from you. Is what manner of fighting is Leon? Is it all in his head? Because then the game could just be set in a hospital bed.
Right.
Is he actually throwing incendiary grenades at small babies with knives? Is he just running around like a place literally throwing incendiary grenades at nothing? Because, then there's an issue. Then you just have a madman. So I prefer to believe that the hallucination term was just because of the movie scene, and obviously that's where they based the kind of idea on. I prefer to believe that it would have been like a supernatural story. But yeah, it fascinates me to see where this would have ended up.
Yeah, for sure. Especially because it's such a, I guess they call it like a vertical slice, right? It's such a tiny part of what would have been a full game. We have no idea what happens before or after this.
Before or after, we have no idea. Did Leon get gassed by something just before?
Right.
Like
who knows what the rest of this would have been spiraling out from this? And
but that's also kind of a gift, not knowing.
Yeah,
because it lets me kind of be like, it is a ghost story,
Yeah, for sure. Steve, what do you think of the Hookman build?
I'm of two minds, because I can take my psychological horror and I can take my survival horror, which is more, should we say, science focused and just generally based on action. So I don't like the fact that it's so in your face with, here's a blue filter, now the scares happen. It's very on the nose. Yeah, the certain ways about, like, Leon walks to a room and there's spooky babies on the shelf, and then the room's blue. Now limply wrist your flame grenades casually onto the floor and just walk by them. It's that doesn't really compel me, but the concepts, the actual like aspirations of it, that I like. The idea that Leon is slowly going insane and being stalked by an immortal killer with chains that admittedly just looks like a bloke with a weird hook thing, just like with a messed up face. Not the scariest silhouette. When you take away the hook, it's just some dude with an ugly face.
Mm-hmm.
However, the fact that he crawls out of a painting and Leon can do nothing as he slowly moves forward and tries to basically carve his head off with a hook is terrifying. It's a weird like parallel for me that some of the gameplay aspects really jar me. Like, it's spooky mode, you must be afraid because the screen is blue. But then you're walking around one of the most realized haunting environments in the classic Resident Evil style, if you like.
Yeah.
Plus, the whole torch over. I swear the torch handgun maneuver that he's had in there at 3.5 betas must have informed Remake 2, because that's all over Remake 2 now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely that. It's another example of maybe, hey, look at that cool thing we did. We could just reuse that.
If I had to put like fog up against hallucination, it feels like you could marry the two in some fashion.
Yes, yeah, 100%.
I don't know how I feel about blue filter scary babies. It just seems a bit too. You're hallucinating now on a Switch just doesn't sit right with me, and it bugs me.
So this, as you mentioned, sort of the other build there, it's worth saying this is a new build of the game completely. It does retain the same story elements as the fog build, except the infection was much more mentical. Mental and physical. Mentical. That's mental and physical as one.
And tentacles.
And that's where the hallucinations that he witnessed comes from. It was scrapped at about 40 to 50%. We'll get to why. In an interview that Kobayashi did with EGM, he said, the next major version was the one where Leon was inside a building with the dolls and the hook enemy. The idea here was to create a very otherworldly sort of game, one that was filled with flashbacks and camera shaking and odd colour effects. The sort where you never know whether what you were seeing was real or just a hallucination. It took much more of a strong Resident Evil style approach to horror. So that is what you're getting at there. I'm inclined to agree with that, to be honest. I feel like that would get a little bit old. It's spooky time. But as Jordan said, Eternal Darkness, clearly taking a leaf out of that book with that quote there. We want camera shaking and odd colour effects and filled with flashbacks and things like that to sort of
that'd be
put
cool.
you on edge.
That would be cool. Like, say you had an inventory system and you really needed to get, like, you're in a panic situation and you're being hunted by monsters, but Leon's sanity is so low, when you pop open the inventory, it's broken, you can't find what you need. Those kind of like Eternal Darkness levels of head messery. That would have been cool, as opposed to, here's a blue filter of crazy.
Yeah, Leon had so many problems that he was going mentical.
Good, I'm glad that got a sequel, that word. Excellent.
Wow, it's 2 t-shirts to get today.
What do we think then of the camera? That's my next question. Like a detached dolly cams, how they refer to it, in the style of something like Outbreak or Code Veronica, that pans around the room. It's sort of fixed camera, but it's not at the same time. And then most importantly, the over the shoulder switch during combat. Obviously, the finished version RE4 is much more rooted to Leon's sort of hip. It's pretty much attached to that point for the entire game, quite controversially to some degree, for good and for bad, the big change. This for me is interesting because, like we were saying earlier, it does feel like the continuation of previous games. It's almost an element of dead aim in it, dare I say it, swapping to a different perspective in the combat. Steve, what do you think of this gameplay style? Are you salivating at the opportunity to play a game like this? Because I sure am.
Yeah, I think it would have worked pretty well. Like the concept of having dynamic and dramatic angles, but then you can switch into aim mode to then kick butt. Yeah, I think that would have been good. Unfortunately, I will say that there is an element of whiplash, though, because if you can't position your character in the right way from the fixed camera angles and you don't realize it until you're aiming, I could see people getting salty at that.
Yeah,
I can see why fixing it into a purely over the hit one for a that kind of shooting style. Yeah, but there's something about them angles, though. They still know how to track a good shot. It's like the next step up from Code Veronica and Outbreak. So yeah, I'm torn, to put it nutshell.
Yeah, that's fair. It's fine. I'm not making you pick one, so you're safe. Jordan, what do you think of the sort of idea of the over-the-shoulder gameplay only when you push down the trigger, I guess, the aim?
Well, it is certainly an interesting way to approach it. Although I will sort of, echo Steve's thoughts that it is a bit sort of troubling to kind of flip between the two. I mean, if you want a kind of an example of that it depends on how you kind of feel about this game and what success it had. But Metroid Other M is one of those kind of games which has two very specific views, and it works to an extent, and it kind of makes sense to an extent. But if you're constantly flipping between that, it might get just a little bit sort of nerve-wracking, especially in those instances, when it's survival horror, where every second counts in terms of your movement. So I mean, like it didn't sort of jump out to me as completely unnatural, but yeah, thinking about it and how much you would be doing it in a gameplay session, it may be something that kind of disrupts the flow. I mean, I love the actual fixed camera and the way that it does kind of pan. I mean, for this kind of game in particular as well, I think it's more suitable because the fact is it's a lot scarier than Resident Evil 4 was. Resident Evil 4 can be scary, but for the most part, you do feel in control. Whereas this is kind of a case of, well, you are playing somebody who is clearly compromised and is being hunted, and it's all being largely taken from these kind of voyeuristic vantages in rooms and something like similar to like Paranormal Activity or something like that. And in that way, you kind of feel like Leon is less safe because he's not in sort of like the driver's seat necessarily.
Yeah.
To some extent, a large part of the gameplay is you kind of moving around and possibly being surrounded by enemies and such like that. And it's pretty claustrophobic as well. So really effective in that way, but with what they want to try and do with the combat, you can see why they might want to depart from that eventually to favor the combat.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I had no thought about the Metroid comparison. You're totally right. My only argument would be that it would probably work a little bit better in this for the environments if they kept him to this kind of tight corridor, small room sort of situation, with Other M being a bit more open. Maybe that's why it feels a bit more like a struggle, the speed that the game moves at and stuff like that. So maybe it could have worked, but at the same time, I agree. I can see why they might take a step back from this one. James, what do you think about the approach to gameplay at this point?
A lot of the points have been said already, but I feel like there would have been an element of motion sickness,
right?
Just because there was like it wasn't just it was like I was on a gimbal when I was watching the trailer. It was like my character was on a gimbal and like it's something I couldn't control, but that might also be just being spoiled by free cam in modern games. I think like it's why I can play Remake and like the original Resident Evil because there's just one fixed camera, right? Whereas with these ones, I mean, there was one particular view where I was like, oh no, I'm feeling sick already, where the camera was zooming in, but it was always also going up as you were getting closer to a corner. And I was like, it would be so disorienting to go back and forward through that corridor. Right.
Yeah.
Because it'd be like in the Twilight Zone. And I was like, oh no, I don't like that. But I do like that, there's a definite cut between the exploration mode and kind of being in combat mode. It's very similar to the lock-on. Well, not similar, but it's the same kind of concept as the lock-on in RE1, the original, where there's something there because you can lock on it. In this one, that's you're in combat because the camera changes. So that's kind of a similarity there. I don't dislike it. I just feel like just tighter camera use would have been better if this game did release. But it was in its testing period, so I'm sure that's one of the reasons why they might have thought twice about it.
And Adam, any thoughts on these camera angles and the gameplay?
Best of both worlds, maybe.
Yeah.
Resident Evil old and Resident Evil new. I can definitely see why that was like a step between what we had and what we ended up with 4 and later games. I really like it personally. I think it adds immersion as well as utility. The only thing I don't like is, as James said, sometimes the angles and the moving camera gets a bit weird, and I can see how that might be a problem. But I'm sure that would have been ironed out. They're generally pretty good with their camera work, especially given the time that this game would have been released. Like honestly, like 3D gaming, like the bane of 3D gaming for many years was camera.
Right, totally.
Going behind walls, getting stuck under things, and just making your life like way worse, not in like a difficulty spike, but in like a why is the camera inside like my arm problem.
Yeah.
It's still a problem, to be honest.
It
It's
is.
because Leon's
I mean,
influenced
it
with the
was
camera.
really bad though. At one point, it was like, oh, it was a plague. But yeah, I actually really like it. I'm about it.
That's fair. So the last thing that I want to touch on before we sort of start to wrap up is continuing the Karamura quote. He said, I wanted to make Biohazard 4 scarier and suggested that the main character travelled into a hallucinatory world. This hallucination was caused by something caught in his vision, a trigger of horror. The first thing I wanted to create was the structure that the world would transform into, a horror hallucination world in real time when viewing pictures and other points of interest, letters, etc. These would become triggers as a means of seeing the story with clarity, understanding the truth behind the scenario, or seeing another truth outside the real world scenario. This is sort of what you were mentioning, Steve, the sort of like, as you so aptly put it, spooky time. This is one of the reasons why the game didn't come to be. This is one of the reasons why it was cancelled, because it was just too ambitious to have essentially a copy of the game world running in the background at all time and swapping between them. It's something that a few games have proposed to do and not really achieved, at least up until very recently with the Medium on Xbox Series X. I remember that being talked about as a selling point of it. These simultaneously running worlds that alter each other. Because
See, you say this, and I turn around and say A Link to the Past.
yeah, but 2D and 3D are very different.
I know, I'm being here. I mean, to be fair, I mean, the closest parallel I can think of for at the time of the era of the technology is perhaps Silent Hill 3, and even then, that's just more like textures that are animated on the walls.
Right, and I think technically those are different maps, aren't they? You walk into one and then you're in the other one, and you do the other side.
I mean, when they do like the virus system stuff, not when you just like go through a doorway, but yeah, fundamentally.
In that case, Steve, what do you think of this as a concept? Specifically as a Resident Evil concept, would you be interested in something like this?
A horror game where Leon is trapped inside his own head. It would be nice to see insights to his personality, how he is when he loses his cool, more so than, say, in Vendetta, where I am sad now because I have been given Chris's plot for some reason from RE6, and I will now murder people on a highway. You know, it's a bit, yeah. And I think it would have added a lot more insight to his character, because he is a bit fluid. Like, he's either an action hero or he's morose. So that I would like. The psychological horror aspect, I could take or leave. I feel like if it's implemented well, and I have to be honest, a lot of steps removed from how the hallucination version appears, I think it could be great. But as it stands, how it looks with blue filter means spooky babies, and now you will drop Molotovs on them. Ooh, don't really grab me.
Fair enough. James, what do you think of this as a concept?
Yeah, I love it. I want to tack on to what Steve said as well. Like later, Resident Evil 4 retail makes no sense for who Leon is, right? But and like future Leons, like it makes no sense, right? But if they ironed out all the problems and he actually went ahead with this, and Mikami actually kind of kept to the basis of what the game was about, the further iterations of Leon would have made way more sense. Like I mean,
that's true,
course,
actually.
Yeah, like the CGI movies would have made way more sense. RE6 Leon would have made way more sense. What we've seen of Eternal Darkness Leon would have made more sense.
Infinite Darkness.
Same thing. But unfortunately, even though, like Steve said earlier, I love RE4, the retail, but it's one of its biggest drawbacks for me is that that's not Leon. That I'm seeing. That's a Chris that I'm seeing mixed with a 1980s action hero, and the game is super fun to play. Mikami did such a fantastic job with gameplay and stuff, right? But in terms of story and character development, it's not fantastic. But if they kept with the basis of these games or the basis of these ideas in this, then it would have been, I think it would have been way more successful. than what we got.
Wow.
Like, of course, games. I super respect developers making games, because I could never, right? And I know it takes a lot, and I know there would have been so many different versions. It probably would have been a few more years, to be honest, with what we've been told, before we got like a truer version of what I'm talking about right now. But yeah, it makes me a little bit sad when I was reading Crimson Head, and I was reading through. I was like, God, this would have made way more sense for the overall storyline than the retail version did, and that made me sad. It made me really, really upset, because it made me realize what we could have had.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're not alone out there. There are definitely fans that feel the same way about this mysterious build and the potential that it had. Jordan, what do you think about?
Fan game, isn't it?
Well,
there was a fan game code Madman. I don't know how much.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything from it in a while. They were just they were redesigning this area and remaking this area to be playable, but I don't know really what's happened since then. If it's progressing or I haven't really seen anything personally.
Yeah, same, to be fair.
Jordan, what do you think of this dual world concept?
I think it's a very compelling proof of concept. Obviously, it was very effective and it was very memorable, which I think says a lot about its legacy, considering it was just a demo, it was just a beta.
Right.
It's interesting because even now, as you say, there's not necessarily a great deal of 3D games that have delved into that idea of having worlds running side by side effectively. And the thing is, a good idea never dies. So if Capcom wanted to dust this off and reintroduce it either into Resident Evil or a different game altogether, they might be finding themselves able to do that in the coming years as the hardware gets more sophisticated, which would be exciting if that was the case. But I think it was obviously a very strong. There's only so much we've seen of it, but all that we have seen is a very strong representation of a psychological survival horror game. So they've still got something there. They've still got something that they could go back and mine for creativity and be able to produce. Maybe not in the Resident Evil IP, maybe of its own completely separate game series. And that's not a bad thing to have. So I mean, if it was to be released tomorrow, I'd definitely play it, and I think most people would, because it's so memorable in the way that it stuck with people, and even by obviously the sentiments of the panel, there's a certain amount of disappointment that this isn't what we got. I mean, obviously, I still absolutely love Resident Evil 4, but yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to agree that it's a shame that in the years since we haven't had anything like this released. So, Capcom, if you're listening, you have an audience for this. You absolutely could make this in the future, and it would work.
Absolutely. And finally, Adam, what do you think of the two-world concept?
I'll pretty much echo everybody and say that it's a concept that is very cool. It's a great idea. Just off of a few minutes of, footage, it's endured. The fan community still, as you were saying, talks about it. So it's definitely something that captured a lot of imaginations and hasn't really been exploited in any way that I can think of, in any well done way. So I think that it would definitely work. I would argue that I still am glad we got the Resident Evil 4 we got, just in terms of, well, maybe it has a bit of an odd legacy because, 5 and 6 weren't, like stellar games, but, I think the rumbling is that if it wasn't for Resident Evil 4, who knows if the series would even be continuing at this point, as fans, or not necessarily fans, but as gamers, were moving away from the kind of gameplay style of the earlier Resident Evil games. So while I absolutely love this little bit of lore and this little bit of world, you know, and I would 100% be willing to play it, like I'd love for them to come out of it. I'm glad that, you know, we kind of got what we got.
So after Hookman, I just would at least want to mention there was one more build that we can't really say anything about, called the zombie build, closer perhaps to Resident Evil's roots as it sounds, zombie enemies. But that was scrapped before we even got shown it, so who knows what that is like. Somewhere along the line though, the Ganado was developed, inspired by basically just the word distrust, I think, and by the film The Thing. A man whose head splits open to reveal his true form. After the cancellation of Shibata's RE4 experiments, Shinji Mikami took hold as director, as is well known and well documented now, and that is the path to the final version that we have. So Adam, you've touched on some of the last questions I wanted to ask, one of which being, would you have preferred the Hookman version to the final game? As you said, no.
No.
Yeah, but the other one, I suppose, is, do you think that the Hookman version has inspired other Resident Evil products? You know, for me, at least, I think it's worth mentioning that we're very excited for Village to explore a gothic aesthetic. We even mentioned it really early in the show, since the showcase is coming up. And it does feel like that could have happened a whole lot earlier, because it feels like the Hookman version was going to go that direction from the little bit we've seen. So do you think that 3.5 has perhaps inspired Village, or is it just time has led it in this direction?
In a roundabout way, I expect. Honestly, you know, the Japanese are very committed to tradition and reference. You know, they're very good about that kind of thing. So, like, they'll find things that you don't even think about. I would think that, you know, more so, it looked like Hookman was going to be more of a stalker kind of enemy than than we had got early. Obviously, we had versions of that. We had a Nemesis, we had Mr. X, but they were, you know, and this would obviously have been scripted as well, but it feels like it would have been used a lot more. So it would have had more of a persistent feeling. I feel like that's kind of a big trend in today's Resident Evil games, is that kind of like big bad, like the man kind of nemesis type thing. So, you know, I think that they probably drew parts of that, as well as obviously, you know, from Nemesis, from Mr. X. There's always an underlying Resident Evilness to that sort of big monster that isn't necessarily the main bad guy the whole time. And, you know, less the weird, like, knife wielding babies and stuff. That was a bit odd. I know they're dolls, not babies, but yeah, I think that there are definitely, I still feel like it leans into 4 a lot. The look, obviously the aesthetic, the kind of way it controls, the way Hookman moves is very similar to the way the Ganados, when they hold up their, you know, sickles or whatever and walk towards you slowly. So I feel like it has a lot in common with Resident Evil 4, probably more so than Village. But I'm very excited to see if there's any more supernatural elements to Village. I don't think there will be actual supernatural elements to it, but I would love if the villagers had supernatural beliefs around the monsters that we have, because I would like for them to still be based in science, as it were. You know, I'd like them to be bio monsters. But it would be very interesting, and I think actually very believable, if you were to take some form of, like, this is where we're going to actually make bio monsters, a very remote, you know, area that's cut off from the rest of the world, and the villagers will absolutely believe, like, oh, that's the freaking monster in the woods, and, you know, they would have a story for that. It wouldn't just be like, oh, this company made it.
Yes.
It would be like, you know, it was a woman's 13th child, and that, you know, it was a monster, and, you know, whatever. Like, that would be really cool to meld that kind of, like, folklore with, you know, big
Pseudoscience.
modern biological science.
It does seem almost like that is the case with Village, because you've got the fairy tale book that we've seen in the trailer. So
yeah.
it's certainly possible. Resident Evil's done it once in a comic, Prelude to the Fall, which is the prequel to Umbrella's End from Umbrella Chronicles, where there's a remote Russian village that think they keep seeing their iconic monster, the sort of folklorish monster that they've all sung about. Oh, suddenly people are actually seeing it, but it turns out there's an Umbrella lab just down the road.
It's such a clever idea.
Absolutely, I'd love to see something like that.
And in a way, it's like a good reverse to actually explain away some folklores.
Right.
Like, it was a monster. It was just an engineered monster for. It wasn't the monster you thought it was.
Absolutely. James, what do you think of Hookman's sort of legacy? Do you think it's inspired other RE products? And the big one, would you have preferred this version over 4? I know you said you were sad we didn't get it, but out of the two of them, if you had to make that decision.
Oh, that's so hard, Si.
Yeah, well, when we do the serious discussions.
I think it has. Like, I mean, I alluded to it earlier on, but I think it has inspired a lot of games. I think Kami has taken a lot of inspiration from it with the retail version, and clearly RE5 has taken some inspiration, from these versions. Again, with the fossilized person and it having, an ages past. I mean, if somebody's fossilized, that's a long time ago, guys. Yeah, so that's super cool. And like the path to whatchamacallit, forgotten the name, but finding that flower and stuff. Yeah. Tons of inspiration. I'm not sure about RE6, but yeah. But in terms of like what I would prefer, oh man, I think I would have preferred, just from what I've seen and what I've kind of pieced together, in a narrative sense, I would have enjoyed the Hallucination Two Worlds idea better if it was ironed out and made into a full game, because it just would have made way more lore sense than what we got. That, please don't take this the wrong way, guys. Go listen to our Resident Evil 4 podcast. I love that game. It is a great game, but just reading all this stuff makes me sad we didn't get it. And in terms of like lore and narrative, which is something I feel very strongly about, I would have preferred to have that over what we got with. I say that like it's bad, it's derogatory, but what RE4 retail gave us.
I'm in that camp. I think for one thing, if this was the game we got rather than 4, I probably would have been less of a grumpy Gus about it, as everyone remembers when the game first came out and I was like, "It's not my Resident Evil, what is this?" This feels more like what I would have expected the next game to be. I could imagine myself being extremely excited about this rather than the retail RE4, which, as I said, now I've come back around on, definitely. And for one thing, it's hard to imagine a series that has gone on so long, taking out what is now quite an early brick in the whole road of Resident Evil, and watching how it changes everything. It's kind of obviously it would have had a huge impact if we hadn't have got the Resident Evil 4 that we did, so it's kind of impossible to imagine the impact of that. But yeah, 3.5 and its ideas and its style very much intrigued me at the very least. So it would be like a tentative yes, but maybe be careful what you wish for. It could have gone horribly wrong for all we know. Jordan, what do you think of the sort of impact of the Hookman build, and would you have preferred it to RE4's final product?
Well, I think I have difficulty actually giving any kind of answer to that question, just because
it's so theoretical.
We don't know what. Yeah, we don't know what that game would actually turn out to be. And, there's that old saying, isn't there? A Resident Evil 4 in the hand is worth 2 bases in the bush. So, with that respect,
I thought you were going to say better the Wesker you know.
That's the other one. That's the other one. Words to live by, With regards to Resident Evil 4, obviously I love that game. I consider it near perfect, and I wouldn't necessarily have that any other way, even though it means throwing to the wayside something that had so much potential and still has so much potential. So I think I would still go with Resident Evil 4. If I knew that Resident Evil 4 was going to be the game that it was, yeah, I'd still go with it. If that's the kind of the question in sort of like considering the direction that Capcom took when they went with the retail release, yeah, still go with Resident Evil 4. As far as the ideas, as far as its legacy, I'm kind of retreading over a previous point, but yeah, I do think that for the most part they've tried to salvage as many ideas from that demo as possible, because clearly it was full of great ideas. Salvage as much of that as possible. Try and strip it of some of the more paranormal natures to it, and repurpose it as an analog within Resident Evil games. And you can see that even in the final product of Resident Evil 4. So I think it has had its impact, just not necessarily how we might expect it to.
Yeah, for sure.
It's still a whole alley which Capcom has never really ventured down in terms of producing something really supernatural. So in that respect, I would imagine that the best is yet to come in terms of what Hookman could be as an inspiration going forward. And again, to retread a point, hopefully they look at where the technology is going and they say, you know what, it might be time to dust off that concept and see if we can try it real time as a technical concept again. And that would be fantastic.
And this time put Billy Cohen in it. And last but not least, Steve, your thoughts on the legacy of Hookman and the big question, RE4 or RE 3.5, which one are you taking?
Yeah, this is difficult for me. But I will testament to 3.5 and 4 for giving us both Devil May Cry and maybe not Haunting Ground as well as these betas. Jeez, like there's parts of all of them that I would want to blend together, like puree the buggers. And if I have to take one wholesale, it has to be 4 for the sheer fact that it's a through line. But the thing is, if you take like Fog or Hallucination, they follow a more direct like route from like remakes kind of beats in terms of how the game goes and the narrative. So it's like, yeah, like as much as I love blasting Ganados on the regular and like the Red 9 handgun, because damn do I love the Red 9 handgun. Shooting fog monsters and being stalked by a Hookman while the filter goes blue and therefore is scary. Like, I mean, you got to think about the level of impact of RE4 at the time. Obviously, has like revitalized the third-person shooters. The thing that gets me is I don't think 3.5 would have had that impact.
Yeah, that's
even
true.
At the time, even at the time, we had Silent Hill, we had Fatal Frame, we had Eternal Darkness. Some fairly solid horror games. That's just the top beats that are like 3D action games, so horror games. This would have felt very much in the same vein. So, part of me wants to disagree and say making that step forward, but the narrative for 3.5 is so much stronger than go and rescue the president's daughter from some lonely and rural part of #not Spain. It's painful to say, like if the narrative was better for Retail 4, it would win. But because it's so juxtaposedly outside of the canon, almost like they murder Umbrella in the opening to a degree with just the stock market, as opposed to Leon is going to the founder of Umbrella, which obviously picks up directly from Code Veronica RE2's ending. And then, Wesker's may or may not be fully present in the game, but his group sure as hell is. Like a massively big narrative thrust in it. And the concept of being infection having something more than just narrative cutscene footnotes. That Leon is impacted and may or may not be deforming or going mad, depending on which version. So, I have to. I'm just reciting these things to myself to try and put a pin on the board. Yeah, I really do feel like maybe, hopefully, the remake somehow manages the way to at least blend some of these concepts. Because my God, 3.5 is astounding.
Wouldn't that be cool though? Wouldn't that be so cool?
Yeah, no, I think given the choice, gun to my head, I will go with 3.5, but I will not be completely the happiest about it.
let me try and persuade you a little bit more. We have had some excellent storytelling and narrative-driven kind of gameplay with Remake 2 and Remake 3. The same team are going to be behind Remake 4, right? And if they draw from 3.5, like one of these 3.5s, particularly Hallucination.
Even aesthetically, 3.5 has some astounding bits we never see, like the inside, the blimp, the castle.
Yeah,
I suppose
true.
Some of it gets reused for friggin' Lost in Nightmares a little. Like, oh gosh, they look fantastic, and then you did nothing with it. Admittedly, the hordes of Ganados, the Verdugo, and the general monster makeup of RE4's enemy roster, significantly better than Ghost Baby with Knife or Shadowy Massive Tentacles from Lost.
Let me drag you the other way, Steve. So, the appeal of 3.5 Hookman build is entirely on its mystery. When if the game were to come out, at one point, that would have to be explained away to be in the Resident Evil universe. It would have to be some kind of Umbrella, HCF, whatever project, and it would all unravel. And I don't know if they would have done it. I mean, look at Resident Evil 4 story. It's kind of crazy. We weren't given any storytelling beats from that trailer, but it's possible that it wouldn't have been a great payoff, because you would have all this cool psychological stuff, but then they would have to root that into the Resident Evil series. And it might be the case that it just comes off a bit underwhelming.
It turns out that Leon did murder his wife.
Yeah. Leon drank some spiked LSD water and
then he went to Silent Hill, where it's blue.
Yeah, blue Silent Hill. Anyway.
Blue Umbrella. Did we just make a connection?
On that bombshell, I am going to wrap us up before we wind up doing another 3-hour RE4 discussion, which seems to be the way things go. Nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors. If you'd like to be part of the show, then please look into auditioning for our file readings, join the Discord server to get in touch with members of the team and our community, discuss Resident Evil with us and other fans, and listen to the podcast live as it's recorded. You can find a link to the server, as well as our Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, YouTube, and more at faspraypod.com. You can find the podcast on YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, and iTunes. And if you enjoyed the show, please do leave us a review where you can. It helps spread the word. You can also support the show by picking up some merch or at patreon.com/faspraypod for as little as $1 a month. In our next episode, we, for the first time in podcast history, get to cover a brand new installment in the continuing canon of Biohazard as we review the hotly anticipated Resident Evil Village. The hype is real. Thank you to the panel. You can follow all of the Pueblo people individually. I'm at Cyniac_123. Steve is at FB Steve Was Taken. Jordan is at Serialbox64. Adam is at Advicar01. James is at Moist Owlet OFF. And finally, thank you for listening and have a good week. Yeah, so we'll do the showcase, everyone. Please join us on Twitch Thursday, just before 11 o'clock BST. We'll be on Twitch doing our reactions. Those will be out on YouTube for those of you who can't make it on Saturday.
Now I've got to work out what time that is in England. In America.
Yeah, that one.
11 BST is like 5, I think. 5 in the afternoon.
Get your telescope out. All right.
Yeah.
Angle it towards
Yeah.
Big Ben.
Okay.
That's right. That'll let you know.
That's the only way we let you see our time.
It's our time.
Very
You can't have it.
long range lenses.